I'm the CTO and co-founder of Alchemy, and we have two really awesome speakers. So excited to welcome to the stage today. John Hennessy, absolute legend. I'll do a bit of an intro, but I don't think we have time to really go over go over everything that you've actually done. But right now, chairman of the board of Alphabet. Before that, you were president of Stanford for over 15 years. That's actually how Nikil and I know you, because you were the president while we were there. So thanks so much for an awesome college experience. Before that, long-time Stanford professor. Literally wrote the book for our industry. Started MIPS in the 80s, I believe. Kind of pioneered modern computing there. And then today you're kind of a central figure in Silicon Valley. I know Mark Andreessen refers to you as the godfather of Silicon Valley, which is
Mark's generous.
pretty badass. And then in 2017, you're the recipient of the Turing Award, which, for those that don't know, is kind of the Nobel Prize of computer science. So overall legend, super excited to have you on stage today. Thanks for coming.
Delighted to be here.
Yeah. And then there's super excited to have Nikil as well. Nikil is my co-founder. He's the chief executive officer of Alchemy. We were at Stanford together. You did both your undergrad and your master's at Stanford in artificial intelligence. Recently, you were recognized by Forbes 30 under 30. You were previously at, I think, Facebook, Google, and Microsoft doing product management. In the last few years, we started a couple companies which we'll kind of go into, including a #1 social app, sort of like top of the App Store, front page New York Times business section, all that stuff. And then today, we're working on a really exciting blockchain infrastructure platform that powers some of the largest blockchain companies out there. So super excited to have you as well. Cool. So both of you guys got some really interesting life experiences. We have 45 minutes. I thought the best way to do this would be to basically kind of like go into your guys' lives. John, dig into your life story a little bit. You're a pioneer in kind of like the early computing internet industry. So I think there's a lot of really interesting stuff there. And dig into your life story, Nikil. And then it'd be awesome to just hear some of the like kind of stories and adventures that you guys have been a part of, all the companies that you guys have been a part of. And then I know this is Silicon Valley, so there are probably a few people in the audience about startups, thinking about starting to own someday. So we'd love to get your advice on entrepreneurship, starting companies. Does that sound good?
Sounds good.
Cool. Before we dive in, we'd love to just set the stage, hear a little bit about Alchemy. So Nikil, do you want to share a little bit about what Alchemy is?
Absolutely. So Alchemy is a blockchain infrastructure company, and trying to keep it super high level without boring you guys with a ton of technical details. But essentially what we do is we power the infrastructure that a lot of these large crypto use. When you think about the large shifts in the last 30 years, there have been major ones: computer, the internet, blockchain. And in each of those shifts, there have been a couple that are really defined the infrastructure, able the whole paradigm to take. So for the computing industry, that was Apple and Microsoft created the operating system and allowed people to build applications on top of the computer infrastructure. And for the web, you had the browser and Google that unlocked information on the web and allowed people to create websites. In a similar way, what Alchemy is working on is being that infrastructure layer for the blockchain.
Very cool. And kind of an easy to understand concept. What do you think is the potential like impact or scale of something?
Yeah, so it's super interesting because this is essentially, call it 1992 of blockchain when you look at the internet. Like Google hasn't been invented, Amazon hasn't been invented, the web is barely even a thing, and that's kind of where we are in blockchain. In the early days of computing, it was very difficult, and I think John can speak more about this, but it's very difficult to kind of think about what computing could be, right? In 1980, only technology companies used computers, and today, every single company, Home Depot, Jamba Juice, whatever, uses computers, right? And in 1992, only internet companies had websites, right? And now every company has a website, right? Taco Bell's out here roasting people on Twitter, and you would never have expected that in 1992. So in a very similar way, I think it's very difficult to predict how blockchain will influence the world, but fundamentally, it's a new technology that offers a complete paradigm shift. And when those happen, if blockchain plays out in the way that people expect it to, then we will see this massively change every aspect of our daily lives: finance, healthcare, day-to-day consumer life. And it's very difficult to predict what it's going to be. But the really exciting thing about Alchemy is we will power that infrastructure layer. So regardless of what applications are built on top of the blockchain, we will be that infrastructure layer that enables those applications.
That's awesome. And John, in addition to being kind of a personal hero of both of ours, you're also an advisor and you're an investor in the company. What gets you excited about Alchemy?
Well, I think when I look at companies, I look for a few things. First of all, I look for a play in a market that's growing, that has great potential, and I think that's where blockchain is. I agree with Nikil, it's really early on, right? There's really important ideas in cryptocurrency. It's still chaotic out there, but cryptocurrency is going to be really important, especially in a global international perspective. That's the first. Secondly, blockchain has lots of applications beyond cryptocurrency. The ability to do secure contracts, for example, and know that people have agreed on something is a valuable asset. So I think it's a platform play, and I like platform plays also when you get a new infrastructure. Second thing is I like companies that have really great talent. Most of the great companies I've known, it's true at Google, it's true at lots of other great companies, they start with really great talent. And it makes a difference. It makes an enormous difference, the quality of the people that you have. And those are some things I like about Alchemy.
Thanks for the kind words. So jumping in, would love to just kind of like go back and hear from both of you guys. What got you into computers and technology?
Well, I arrived here. The place we're sitting right now used to be a vacant lot. Then it became part of Silicon Graphics. Then it became the Computer Museum. You go over the Googleplex. I came to the Valley when the Googleplex was still a family farm. It was a family farm, right? And the Shoreline Amphitheater was a waste dump. That's what it was, landfill. Right? So a very different era. Intel was still a DRAM company. Apple hadn't yet started, but it's been amazing to see. When I arrived, if you wanted to go talk to the leaders in the computing industry, you went to SFO, got on a plane, and flew to New York or Boston. Look how much it's changed. It's really amazing how much it's changed. And so I've always been excited about computing since I was in high school, but to live through this era has been a real thrill and absolutely incredibly exciting.
Nikil, how about you?
Yeah, I was not at the very, very early part of
I don't
computing.
think so. I don't think you were born.
But I loved computers from a very small age. My mom had gone back to school and was doing her master's in MIS, which was like computer business degree. And we had a computer at home, and we had DOS, and I would play like Mario, just typing, where you like type, and then like Mario jumps up and hits the blocks. And as I grew up, made websites, made video games, played way too many video games. And honestly, like, it's kind of like surreal to even be sitting here, because when I was a high school senior, I was looking at where to go to college, and I saw Stanford, and I was like, wow, the president of Stanford is an engineer, and he started all these companies, and it was so cool. And I definitely like idolized John coming to Stanford, and then just really, really cool to have the chance to get to you and have you involved.
Right.
So John, would love to hear a little more, kind of like, tell us about the early days. Like, what were people working on? What got people excited? Like, when computer was coming on, like, did people know it was going to be a...
So I think it's interesting to take a few snapshots of this. I remember there was a thing called the Homebrew Computer Club, a group of people that met up at Stanford that were interested in building computers. And this is before there were any personal computers. And Steve Jobs, Wozniak used to come to this. And people were building homemade computers out of early microprocessors, gluing these things together. But you could begin to see that there was going to be a personal computer revolution. And I still remember when I saw my first Xerox Alto, and I said, wow, this is a very different notion of what a personal computer can be. So, of course, that revolution took over. We never can tell how big these things are going to be at the beginning. They surprise us. I remember going over to see the early prototype of Yahoo when it was still at Stanford. And I go over to Dave and Jerry's office, Dave Philo and Jerry Yang's office. And they've got this thing running on there. And they show me that their favorite pizza place would allow you to put an order online. And all of a sudden, I realized that the web was not just going to be about a bunch of nerds exchanging scientific data and papers and things like that, but it was going to change the way we did everything. So you see these moments. Another one was when I first saw an early demo of Google. And I kind of thought, search was in pretty good shape. We had AltaVista, we had Lycos, we had InfoSeek. We had these other search engines, which were much better than what had come before. And then I saw a demo of Google, and in fact, I showed a demo to the then president of Stanford, Gerhard Casper. And Gerhard is a constitutional lawyer, but he had one real qualm with the internet. Namely, when you did a search for Casper, what you ended up with was the Casper the Friendly Ghost website. He was really upset about this because it wasn't his image of the kind of website he wanted popping up when you searched his name. And I showed him that when you did a search for Gerhard Casper on Google, you got the Stanford president's website, and he was very happy with that. But you see these things, and you realize there's been not just a small improvement, but a big jump forward. And that's what creates new companies, creates new opportunities.
And who I know, like, spend a lot of time in, Stanford, and then you also did. How did
Well, my first company, I was a reluctant entrepreneur. I actually, we had done this research on reduced instruction set computing. We thought everybody would pick up the ideas. We thought we'd publish our papers, guys in industry would just pick this up and start doing it. And what happened was, in fact, some of the players actually had canceled their project using reduced instruction set. Later on, we found out the reason they canceled them is the products were so much better than previous products that they disrupted their entire product line, and they were nervous about doing that. Other people were reluctant. There's a big not invented here syndrome that often invades big companies. So we got persuaded that we had to go do it because otherwise the technology wasn't going to move out of the research environment quickly. So that was what got me persuaded the first time around. Second time around, when we did Atheros, which was one of the really early Wi-Fi companies, we knew we had a transformative technology. We just had to get the market to move along and accept that technology.
And then president of Stanford, tell us about that.
Well, it's a fascinating job to worry about 40, 50, 60,000 people. You have to worry about, you get a lot of responsibilities you never thought you'd have. So one of the things you have to worry about is the endangered species on campus. So we have tiger salamanders. The tiger salamanders were being killed when they crossed over Junipero Boulevard. So we had to build a love tunnel for the salamanders so that they could go under there and not get run over. So you get to worry about a lot of things. Stanford has about 125,000 alumni. They care passionately about what's happening at the university and what's going on. You've got students, obviously, you have to worry about. And then you have a stellar group of faculty. But it's a wonderful opportunity. If you're an intellectually curious person and you like learning new things and you like working with really intelligent people, there's no place better than a university.
Was that something you thought you'd do?
I didn't. No. I'm the proverbial frog in the pot of water. The temperature goes up and the frog's cooking before the frog realizes it. I never thought I'd be administrator because I loved teaching and research and doing that. In all the cases, people often ask me, well, why did you come back after you started a company? Why didn't you just stay there? And the answer is I missed engaging with students. That was my true passion. It's the thing I love the most. I love teaching. I'm just finished teaching a freshman seminar and a graduate course. So that was what I missed, and that's why I decided to go back, spend most of my time at the university.
Yeah. And then you stepped down in, I think, 2016. We were all sad to see you go. What are you excited about these days? Not that you're not excited about Stanford, just
I'm still excited. I've started a new, together with some colleagues, a new global scholarship program to try to bring in the most talented young people around the world for their graduate studies, but also to develop future leadership. I became convinced we had a major leadership crisis around the world. This was long before the current election, the last election had taken place. But you could already see signs of it. I mean, even in the Obama days, there was deadlock in Washington and Congress, right? There was the beginnings of uncertainty in Europe with the refugee crisis and other things. And Brexit was kind of beginning to appear. But it's gotten much worse. And we've had problems in corporate leadership, problems in nonprofit leadership, problems in government leadership. So I said, well, I'm a lifelong educator. What can I do? Why not try to find some of the very brightest young people around the world who are committed to try to make the world better, bring them in, offer them a graduate education, give them a scholarship, and help prepare them and push them on their way to help make the world better. So that's what I'm working on.
That's awesome. And Nikil, tell us a little bit about sort of like how you got into startups, how you got into technology.
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually grew up in a town that's the complete opposite of San Francisco in the Bay Area. Lubbock, Texas, super small. Has anybody heard of Lubbock? Like, raise your hand.
Oh.
What? How? Okay, I'm pretty impressed. Like, no one here has usually heard of Lubbock. It's basically you take San Francisco, invert everything about it. It's like there's no building over 4 stories tall. Everyone wears cowboy hats. Everyone drives a huge pickup truck, and it's super flat. So it was awesome, though. I absolutely loved it. Came to Stanford, did my undergrad and grad in artificial intelligence. Joe and I actually met because we TA'd the database class together at Stanford. It was typically like, you know, as a TA, you try to pick the classes that are fun and easy and not much work. That quarter, we accidentally got the class where we wanted to try out this new concept of massive online learning, and we had 150,000 students in our class, and next quarter that spun out to become Coursera. So it was an awesome experience. I definitely remember like staying up the night of like coding programs to write certificates for 150,000 students. After Stanford, I had a complete, like, total blast at Stanford. Never wanted to leave. They basically had to kick me off campus. So after that, the way Joe and I had thought about our lives were like, look, you have one shot at life. You don't get multiple chances, reincarnation and religion aside. But basically, they said, how can we hit that home run? Like, how can we have that awesome impact on the world? And one of the really cool things about going to Stanford and living in this area is you get to meet people like John or Mark Zuckerberg or Larry and Sergey, and you get to see like, wow, these are such incredible people. But when you get to know them, you're saying, wow, like if they can do it, like I think I have a chance to do it too. So for us, like the way we thought about our lives is you have 2 axes, right? Your impact in your life is the number of people's lives you touch times the depth of the impact you have in their life every day. And the number of people's lives you touch was kind of obvious to us in the sense of never before in human history could you type on this magic metal box and build something that every person on the planet uses, right? And the way that software has transformed the world just really spoke to us. In addition, it happened to be what we loved and what we really enjoyed doing. So that was obvious. We said we want to do software, something with computer science and software. The y-axis was really interesting because after college, I think the single best thing that Stanford does, in my opinion, is create this incredible sense of a community. I'm still like best friends with all my friends from my freshman dorm. And we really wanted to create that after college. And we said, what would it be like if you could make it feel like you lived with all your friends, like you were in that Stanford freshman dorm forever? So we actually Joe and I spent several years. We made a bunch of different products. The idea was like, how do you recreate physical proximity and how do you, without actually being close to other people, right? How do you recreate those intimate personal relationships? And we had at Stanford. So we spent a bunch of time doing that. And one of the apps we ended up building ended up being really popular, number 1 app in the App Store, and did that for a while. The really interesting shift for us was when we had seen these different trends in technology. You know, we had kind of read about the computing shift. We had kind of been partially firsthand in seeing the internet take off. And then we had seen blockchain for a really long time. We had seen it in 2012, 2013, 2015. And there was a shift around 2017 where we said, wow, this is shifting from just a means of currency to a developer platform. And in a way, it introduced fundamental new primitives that allowed you to build applications that were never possible before. And that shift became really exciting to us, where we saw a ton of our smart friends going into it. And we said, man, this could be the next internet. And if it is, maybe it's not, but if it is, and you know, there were a lot of companies that when the internet was happening said, hey, this is not really a thing, right? If you were the Hollywood or you were newspapers and you're like, oh, this internet's not a thing, right? Then you're in big trouble. So we said, look, if this is the next big technology shift, we are in the middle of it and we have a chance to build a really foundational company. So essentially, like, that's how Alchemy got started.
That's awesome. We have a little bit of, I assume this giant clock ticking down is how much time we have left. So we got a little bit of time left. Would love to just open it up here. You guys have both been involved in some really exciting, really interesting companies and some really interesting times. So I'd love to just open it up here. Any stories about maybe like companies you guys have been involved in, Google, MIPS, different startups, what the early days were like. And if you've got any stories that are kind of behind the scenes that maybe people haven't heard before, that's awesome too.
All right, well, where should we start? So I think, you know, the thing to realize about all, the vast majority of startups is they all go through a crisis at some point.
All the time.
And it happens. And being ready. I mean, certainly in their previous company, they went through some crises. But I think that's really about the importance of building a team that can stick together and hold together, because those crises are going to occur. Google's maybe one company that didn't go through as many as others because it had a business model that clicked really early on and worked really early on. But that's not usually the case. Most companies have got to find their way through dilemmas and crises in order to get an alignment of their technology, what the growing business model is, who the team is. Normally, you get a crisis in the team. You don't have all the right people. You're missing somebody, or somebody really isn't a good team member. That's when you really test how well the founding team and the inner core, the early players, can really hang together, because you're going to have to do that. We had to do it early on in MIPS. The company had about 120 people. We had gotten our first customer deal early on. So the CEO said, we got to start expanding. We're going to get more customer deals. He started building out sales and other parts of general administration marketing. And we simply built too fast. It took a long time to get that next customer. And as a result, we had overexpanded. We were practically out of money. We had to go through a crisis, make a change in CEO, bring in a new CEO. As we're recruiting the guy, he looks at our books and says, well, you've only got about a month's worth of cash left before you're going to run out of money. Why would I take this job? So we had to persuade him that it was going to be a great company, but that was a key turning point. We had to go through a layoff. Brutal. Doing a layoff in a small company, it's really brutal. And then the CEO said to me, so we did the layoff on Friday morning. The pink slips got given out. Everybody was out the door by Friday noon. And he said, okay, in the afternoon at the TGIF, I want you to stand up and talk about why this is still going to be a great company. So that's a real test. It's something you have to go through, and you have to inspire your team and everything. But we managed to get through it. We held the core engineering team together. Biggest problem with the layoff is when you lose a lot of people that you didn't want to lose. And that's a morale breaker, and it really can kill the company. But that's a typical kind of crisis you go through. Financial crises often get faced in these kinds of things. Building the team is another kind of crisis. One of the things that was remarkably lucky at Google is that they found Eric Schmidt to come in as CEO. There are very few people that could have been the CEO to work with Larry and Sergey. First of all, Larry and Sergey are really smart and they're really technical, and they wouldn't have taken somebody who couldn't engage with them technically in depth. And Eric had that magic resume of experience as a CEO, as a lead business leader, successful at several companies in the Valley, combined with the technical depth. And that's a rare thing. Had that not happened, I don't know how the company could have flourished the way it flourished. So it's building that team is just a critical thing, and figuring out. And sometimes you get it wrong. The two companies I've started, we had to replace the CEOs in both cases. They were good people. They brought the company to a certain stage, but they couldn't bring the company to the next stage. And this is one of the things I worry about currently in the Valley. We have a lot of founder CEOs. I'm a big believer in founder CEOs, assuming the founder has their ego under check. The hard problem is if a founder CEO can't take the company to the next stage, it's often a crisis to get that person to realize that the best interests of the company are for them to step aside and let somebody else take over the CEO role. But boy, if you have a lot of ego, that's a really hard thing to do when it comes to doing that. And so I think it's a crisis that many people face as they put together their companies.
What are some of the memorable moments? I know there's a lot about crises, but there are also a lot of, it's a roller coaster. There are always really good moments. What are some really good moments that you've seen?
Yeah, I think, each one of these, every company contributes something to the Valley. We never understood the fact that advertising could be used as a way to monetize on the World Wide Web. Nobody would have really understood this or guessed it. And had Yahoo not ventured out there and figured out that business model was a viable one, we would have never guessed it. And that when I saw them, the reason that Dave and Jerry got their company started was the university kind of threw them out off campus, because at that time, Yahoo had grown to such a size in terms of network traffic that more than half the network traffic coming on campus was headed for their little server. Their little server, by the way, was named Akibono because they were both sumo wrestling fans. And Akibono was the first non-Japanese born sumo wrestler to make it into the top level. He was Hawaiian, actually. So they named Akibono. I remember going over to see the early demo. You walk in their office, and there are empty soda cans, stacks of pizza boxes, and a futon. And they were basically spending nights working on trying to build what became the Yahoo prototype. But they got moved off campus, but that was a remarkable moment. I still remember going down to visit Larry and Sergey early on when Google was a really tiny company. And I went down to visit them, and I brought up my freshman class down there, and they both came, which tells you how much smaller it was than it is today. And we sat down, we had lunch, and we talked about their vision for the company. And they said, our vision is we're going to organize the world's information on the web and make it useful. And they had this really big vision for the company from the very beginning. And I think that's one of the things that's made it a great company. You have a big vision, you're willing to invest for the long term, to take a long-term perspective on what might be done.
Wow, that's cool. And the early days actually don't sound, I know we had some pretty crazy moments in some of the companies that we've worked on. So Nikil, do you want to share some of those?
Yeah, it's actually really funny. I get a lot of friends commenting and questioning me, what is startup life like? And let me give you a hint. It's actually not like we're just sitting on a stage all day talking about stuff. I remember, so one of the things we had done was Joe and I actually started working out of our apartment, and there was this period when our app was blowing up. We had to double our database every single day. We were getting hundreds of thousands of users a day joining, and there's a period when it was just, we felt like we were like, what is going on? So I remember our power went out. We had a gas leak. We hadn't left the apartment. I remember Joe went out, and I was like, when was the last time we left the apartment? It was Thursday evening. On Saturday, the guy who had delivered the food to us couldn't figure out the door buzzer, so we had walked out to get that. But I think before that, it had been almost 7 days since we had seen the outside world. We literally just not left our apartment and just working like crazy. One of the things that we did was we just didn't know a lot of things, so we just did it the way that we thought we should. So for example, when we built this app, we actually thought no one would use it. We thought just our 2 friends on our street would use it. So we put our phone number in there so they could just text us. Because we built it in the afternoon. We said, we don't want to build a whole help system. It's just Mateen and Ravi who are going to use it. So they can just text us. So we had this button that you could text us. Turns out, when you give millions of people, and then suddenly millions of people started using it. So then millions of people around the world have our phone numbers. So of course they're gonna hit that button and text us. So not kidding you, we were getting probably close to 10,000 text messages a day. We actually broke Apple's iMessage infrastructure, and we had to email Tim Cook and be like, so I spent 2 days at the Apple store, and obviously they couldn't do anything. So then I emailed Tim Cook, and I was like, Tim, we were almost neighbors. You have to help me out. We have no other hope. I haven't gotten calls or texts. After you get about 14,000 text messages, your phone stops getting calls. So we didn't get calls or texts for 6 months straight. And it turns out, a few days later, I get a call from some executive person like, Tim read your email. He wants us to help you out. And I was like, guys, but I'm an engineer. 10,000 text messages a day, that's not that much, right? And they're like, well, I was like, I'm sure Justin Bieber gets more text messages than me. And then they were like, I'm not allowed to say, but you guys have more than Justin Bieber. And I was like, so are we top 50 or top 20? They're like, well, I can't say, but yeah. So basically, we found out we were the top 20 iMessage users in the world, and broke Apple's infrastructure. And to this day, I still get FaceTimes from random middle schoolers in the Middle East who have our app and do it. So it was fun, and we spent a lot of time. There were days when we would just spend 10 hours a day just responding to users and talking to users. Another kind of crazy thing we did was we wanted to user test our app in real life. So one of the things is when people build products, you really want to get as much user feedback as possible. And the typical cycle is, I spend 2-3 weeks building an app, I put it in the app store, it takes like a few days to get approved. Now I need to wait for user feedback and then build the next version. So call it like a 1.5-month iteration cycle, right? And we were just like, that was way too long. So what we did is we went to Berkeley, dressed up as students, and pretended to be students and would just go around and ask people to play with our app. And it was really interesting because one of the questions we would always get, and we always told the truth, they would say like, oh, are you guys students? And we said, oh, we graduated recently, which was like, true. And we just not from Berkeley. We would actually like show them the app and say, what do you think about this? And then we would get their feedback and we'd actually plug our computer into the phone and like just recode the app right there, talk to someone else 2 minutes later. So it's like we cut that iteration cycle down from about 2 months to about 2 minutes. And that was like super, super key. I don't know if we've actually talked about this publicly, but my friends were always giving me like a ton of crap. They would say, why are you at Berkeley wearing Berkeley gear, posting Berkeley? Like, I thought you were a Stanford fan. So this is definitely this thing there. But it was a lot of good times.
Nice. And you still have thousands of texts on your phone,
We
right?
still have thousands of texts on our phone.
Nice. We got just a little bit of time left, so one last question for both of you guys. I know you've seen a lot of startups, been involved in a lot of successful companies. What do you think are your top pieces of advice for people looking to start a company someday?
Focus relentlessly on what your sustainable performance advantage is. Relentlessly focus on it. Build it, build it, build it. Second, get the very best people you can. Build the best team you can. Third, play for the long term. You get your first product done, that's a license to get your second product done, and it's really your second product that's going to have to sustain the company. So those are 3 things that I always try to tell people about.
And in the long term, is it multiple products on top of each other?
Absolutely, on the long term. That's why building platforms, building things that are not just single product kind of instances, but will really build a sustainable advantage. If you want to build a great company over time, that's what you have to do.
Yeah, and Nikil, speed run. Top piece of advice.
I think first, startups are really hard. Companies are really hard. And just what we've seen is the people who persevere are the ones who last and win. And number 2, I would just say like learn as much as you can. One of the best ways that we've been very fortunate to learn is learning from incredible people like legends like John, right? It's like he has like decades and decades of knowledge that would take us decades to learn, but he's able to impart that to us. So that's the second one. And third thing is just like have fun and surround yourself with awesome people. Like Joe, I still say the single best decision I made in the company's history is like working with Joe and just having someone to smooth out your emotions and it's a blast. So yeah.
Awesome. Guys, Thank you so much for being here. Thanks for sharing your stories. Let's give them a round of applause.
Thank you. Thanks, Joe.